Hello and namaste everyone. Welcome to DNX 2021, Globant's premier data and analytics web conference. DNX 2021 is all about digital primacy through data and AI. DNX is a two-day web conference which will be packed with talks, innovation stories, networking, and product showcase events. We are your hosts for the evening. I am Alind Bilore and I am a data architect at Globant.
I'm Priya Badlani and I am a BI engineer at Globant and we welcome you to day one of the Next.
We are living in a generation that has transitioned from digitization to digital transformation. We are also realizing that just transformation is not enough. We need to transcend to the next level digital primacy.
So be ready to experience cutting edge data analytics and AI technology, insights on the future of digital primacy through data and AI, and get inspired by ideas, people, technology driven innovations, and network with industry leaders. Before we begin this exciting journey, here are some important points to remember. First, throughout the session, please share all your queries using the chat box where our volunteers will answer them. Second, please keep tweeting with the hashtag DNX2021. Most liked tweets and LinkedIn posts stand a chance to win exciting goodies.
We are highly delighted to invite Head of India Delivery Center Globant, Shivraj Sable, to deliver the keynote, followed by Avijit Datta, the Head of Data and AI Studio Globant India, to deliver the kickoff.
Hey folks, welcome everyone to this amazing web conference. I'm super excited to welcome all of you. My name is Shivraj. I'm the head of Globant India, and I really want to congratulate each one of you to find time for something that is really going to be an investment in yourself. So, welcome to this web conference. Thank you again, everyone here for the organizing team. What I really want to talk about quickly is what has been changing in the industry and why is it important for us to spend time in some of these conferences as well as understanding what the change is. What do you see in the change that has been happening over the last 25, 30 years is how we have been moving from one phase to the other. So if you see in the initial stages of the whole IT outsourcing, we were in the stage of digitization where things were done manually and companies came up to create digital solutions. And that's where we see a large amount of our IT outsourcing industry really shape up. And then we came to a stage where, with the impact of that W infrastructure, we started seeing newer solutions. So we wanted to create new solutions around cloud. So you have something on prem, let's move you to the cloud. Let's go to microservices. Let's look at a newer tech stack within your tech stack. So all these were possible with digital upgrades. But then over the last 5 to 10 years, what is really happening is we're seeing there's a huge need for companies to completely transform themselves to be relevant in the next 5, 10, 20 years. It's very important that we understand this new game. I mean, a very simple example for that is in cricket, right? You've already always seen Mr. Sunil Gavaskar really perform well, but what we always say is, would he get selected in the team today? The chances are low because the game has changed. It used to be a 5 day game, then a 1 day game, and now a 4 hours game. So now you have to have different skill sets to really win this game, which is probably physical fitness comes first before even cricketing skills. So that is what is happening when the game is changing. The skills required to be successful have to change, and that is what we are seeing. We're seeing there's a huge need for companies to really be augmented organizations, which means the true use of AI, machine learning, and data science in such a way that it's actually embedded in your DNA. We are not looking for just the ability to do some POCs, really add one or two features through machine learning here and there. The whole idea is how do we embed that as part of your DNA? With Globant, I would be very proud to say that along with Steve Wozniak, our CEO, Martin Bigosha, launched augmented coding. And we are very focused in embedding every aspect with machine learning, with AI, and truly reinventing how we are. So we are truly today an augmented Globant where our recruitment, career path, delivery, our culture, a lot of our aspects that we use on a daily basis are truly driven by AI and machine learning. So I'm very, very proud about that fact. And that's something we should all look forward to. So I think the whole idea about this whole prospect is how do organizations and people change? Now, we talked about organizations changing from this. It's equally important for people to start changing. So the whole idea is for engineers today, it's very important to make this shift from left to the right. Right? I keep giving this example of introductions, how we introduce ourselves. We have a lot of folks introducing, my name is so and so with X number of years of experience as a Java developer, as a ServiceNow, or a data scientist, or a data architect. Unfortunately, a lot of these tools have become our identity, which is not the case. You have to make the shift from the left to the right by truly investing in yourself, by truly being able to translate every single line of code into business impact. If you're able to do that, if you're able to see the larger picture, if you're able to provide end-to-end solutions, I think that is what you are. And this is very important for you, for working on transformative solutions, for working on end-to-end digital transformations. You need to be of someone who of a caliber where you understand some of these uh, aspects, the ability to look at the larger picture and the business impact of whatever you do. So I think overall it's very important for us to understand where we are going. The whole industry again is growing really, really rapidly. So one of the reasons why we are focusing on this today is also because where the industry is going. So this whole transformation industry was a mere 13.5 trillion worth in 18, but now by 23 we expect this to be far over 53 trillion worth, right? So when this is happening, obviously we're expecting more and more companies and individuals to focus on digital transformation, because that is exactly where the whole industry is moving. Okay, so in a nutshell, if I want to introduce Globant, we transform organizations, and not just technology. We transform organizations and businesses to be ready for a digital and cognitive future. Okay, so that's about us. I think welcome to this amazing conference. I know there is so much more content which is amazing after this, so I don't want to keep you away from that. Welcome all of you. Congratulations for spending and investing time in yourself. And yeah, over to the amazing content. Thank you.
Thank you, Shivraj. Hello, everyone. I am Abhijit Datta, and I head the Data and AI studio at Globant India. I'm extremely delighted to welcome you all today to the inaugural edition of DNX 2021, a premier web conference on the futuristic trends of data analytics and artificial intelligence. Today's era is of digital and cognitive transformation for truly revolutionizing the way any business is done. Such transformations are a result of sustaining innovations, which helps organizations to have a consistent edge over their competitors. We believe there can be no digital or cognitive transformation without data. And data is at the core of the ecosystem to achieve these transformations sustainably, consistently, and repetitively. Now, coming to the theme of this web conference, which is digital primacy through data and AI. The reason we have chosen this theme is because we believe we are living in a generation that has transitioned from digitization to digital transformation. And now we are realizing that just transformation is not enough. We need to all augment ourselves and transcend to the next level in this journey and achieve what is called as digital primacy. This is to take the digital transformation journey one step further by augmenting businesses to achieve something that was just an imagination before, enhancing the liaison between business and technology in a way that both not only complement each other but also augment together. And the only way to achieve it is to ensure that we don't repeat the same mistakes twice. We fail fast, we experiment more, we adapt to the ever changing business needs, its value proposition, its offerings, and fine tune the strategies for developing a true data driven and alive ecosystem. Digital primacy can be achieved by truly harnessing the power of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And in order to do that, it is imperative for companies to set a very strong foundation on big data technology, its processes, and very importantly, its culture, a data driven culture. And Globant has expertise in exactly that. Over the past 15 years, we have been helping customers to discover, define, and develop data strategies to data products which are aligned with their business needs. We create an ecosystem where the business strategy is at the core and the data strategy is formed in complete consonance with it. This is by taking into account the most important ingredients in order to achieve it, which are process, people, and culture. And aligning these three helps in creating data platforms, which further evolves as data products, such as AI models, chatbots, finance terminals, API services, just to name a few. We achieve this through a variety of service offerings, which are data strategy, data platforms, data as product, insights, MLOps, and blockchain, through our various roles in the form of data strategists, data architects, data scientists, data analysts, and blockchain consultants. We provide an extensive and integrated ecosystem that helps our clients to augment their business by working with them. We are also partners with the major players in the space, which acts as a catalyst to constantly augment innovation, learning, and spearhead the digital transformation journey for our customers through data. Our teams are cross continental, cross cultural, diverse, and inclusive. And this helps us to provide a truly top notch, consistent, fast, qualitative, and value added services to our customers. Disparate teams not only enhance the time to market the solutions, but it also helps us to provide maximum overlap with our clients based on their strategic locations. And we believe this is truly important, especially during the discovery phase of the entire enterprise development lifecycle, where the key solution strategies needs to be carved out based on the business strategies. We believe a true digital primacy can only be achieved by organizations that are constantly augmented in terms of their processes, their people, and their culture. Technology is just the tip of the iceberg. Such augmented organizations are not only sustainable, but are also ready to adapt to ever changing business needs of their customers. These augmented organizations also constantly innovate to transform their processes, people, and culture, thereby making themselves ready for any challenges that come along. Such augmentations and transformations are not easy, and doing it consistently needs a cohesive ecosystem that complements each other. Hence, at Globant, we are proud of one of our key initiatives that is helping us to augment ourselves consistently and in a sustainable way, and that is the Be Kind initiative. Be kind to the peers, to the communities, as well as very importantly, to the climate. This is the way of our lives, and hence a very essential part of our culture that we share with our stakeholders. I would like to end this presentation with this famous quote by Colin Powell. If you are going to achieve excellence in big things, you develop the habit in little matters. Excellence is not an exception, it is a prevailing attitude. And with that, I welcome you all once again for this web conference. I'm pretty sure all of you are going to have a great time learning and enjoying this web conference as much as we did in creating it. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, my name is Agustin Huerta and I am the SVP of Studios at Globant. I'm based out of Buenos Aires, Argentina, so it's great to be virtually there with you. I hope you can enjoy this great web conference that we are going to be taking right now, the DANXT 2021, our first web conference on the NXT series to be dedicated to data and AI. As many of you know, data is perceived nowadays as the oil of the future, where the information that we can leverage from that data is a key to connect better with our audiences, to connect better with our own business, and take decisions that will drive us to the future. in a way forward. In this web conference, you will be able to see and understand what we as Globant are building, but also some of our partners, our external speakers, what they are doing within their organizations, how they are digitally transforming the organizations to be ready for this new era of data primacy. So I really hope you enjoyed the event. I hope you can take very interesting takeaways with you from it. And hopefully, we are going to be repeating this in the future and expect you to see there too. Thank you for joining and hope you enjoy the web conference. Bye.
Do you know the hackers are getting smarter day by day? In 2021, the suspected financial services fraud attempts rise nearly by 150%. Fraudsters have discovered so many new ways to do the financial fraud.
Exactly. That raises the need for smarter solutions to detect and prevent them. Our first talk of the day takes us to the journey using AI to model uncertainties in the financial world. Financial world is filled with uncertainties, whether it's financial fraud, missing data, or unseen events in the financial world. Let's hear how recent developments in AI and machine learning can be used differently and more efficiently to tackle these typical problems.
Let me introduce you to our distinguished speaker, Nitendra Rajput. Nitendra is an ACM distinguished scientist and an IEEE senior member. In his current role at MasterCard, he is setting up the AI Garage Center in India to enable it to solve all ML problems across different business verticals globally in MasterCard. He is based out of Gurgaon, India. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Nitendra Rajput.
Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to all of you. Depending on your time zones, it could be a good morning, good afternoon, or a good evening to you all, but I'm certainly sure that it's going to be a nice half an hour discussing this wonderful topic. And I'm going to be talking about AI in finance and specifically focusing on using AI to model uncertainties in the financial world. I'm sure this is an interesting topic for all of us, given the timing of it, because we've gone through these last 1.5 years of significant uncertainties because of the pandemic, but it has also taught us a lot of lessons in our lives, which I'm not going to get into, but definitely in the space of finance, which I live and breathe. And I would want to use this opportunity to share some insights on how we can use this technology, AI, in the financial domain in situations like these where uncertainties are prevalent in nature. So that's going to be the context. But the way we are going to run this session in the next half an hour or so is that it's going to be you may feel like I'm going to be speaking, but it's going to be very interactive because I'm sure you are going to be as active as I would be in this session. And this interactivity would mostly be around I expecting you to prove yourself what you're looking for. Hopefully, once you get to know about this whole space, you are going to be excited about it. And then, given the context from which you are listening to this conversation, I can't understand that context as much as you do. And therefore, I think that you are going to be more powerful and intelligent in finding possibilities in your own area of work using these technologies and the problems that we are going to discuss today. To draw to draw parallels with the agenda that I have here, I have a nice painting on the right hand side that you see. This is a painting by Isher, and he's known for creating these paradoxes. And this specific painting kind of says that is the right hand making the left hand, or the left hand making the right hand. And the parallel to this talk agenda would be that is it that I'm sharing something with you, or is it actually something that you are gaining on yourself? So I won't do much of the thinking, it will come out as you go through this session. So let's see how this goes. So I would want you to engage, and the first thing I would want you to actually think of and engage your brain in understanding is to just notice how our brain works. Now, you see this image inside a white box. I want you all to have a look at it, and I'll pause for a brief time and just think about what you think could this image inside the white box be representing. Give it a wild thought and imagination, and then once you have a couple of thoughts in your mind, we'll go forward. Had this been interactive, I would have also known what you're thinking of, but I can still imagine based on what I have generally seen users to think about it. All right, so now keep that thought in mind, whatever you had thought about, and now let me actually make this as a video. So now you see those black dots which were spread around inside this white box. They're moving in some pattern, right? And I'm sure, let's reveal the secret sauce here. When the image was still, a lot of you would still have been able to realize that this is actually a dog. At times, I have seen that people also say that this is some specific countries in a world map, or some such other thoughts also come up. But as soon as we start to see these dots moving in a pattern, almost all of us are able to realize that it is a dog, right? Now let's look at another interesting thing. Some of us can actually say that not just that it is a dog, but it's a Dalmatian. A breed of that dog is also you can predict using these small dots and especially the movement. Now let me tell you, some of us could have also said, if you had that dog, you could have also said that this is my dog, this is my Dalmatian, versus no, this is a Dalmatian, but not mine. Now, I wanted us to realize that this is how our brain works. Imagine the amount of data that is available to you inside this white box. It is immensely small. There are so many missing data points. Even if you look at the dog running right now, you see that on the legs, it has only one dot in one leg, in the one front leg, another dot in the second front leg. Still, you're able to figure out that it's a leg, and you're able to figure out that there's a mouth and eye, and so on and so forth. Using the way the dog is moving, you can actually say whether using gait recognition kind of techniques, which are inbuilt in our minds, we can say that this is my dog versus not my dog, and so on, right? Most important thing to notice is that with very less data, which means with a large amount of missing data, our brain is able to figure out the breed of the dog, or that it is a dog, and so on. I want us to remind ourselves of this fact when I go to the next slide, that our brain is wired to pick patterns, to identify things from a significantly large amount of missing data. If you see the entire image of the dog, it has only 7 to 10% of data points there. Everything else is missing. So with 90% missing data, we are able to figure out that this is actually this particular object with 90% missing data. What has this got to do with AI? You might be wondering, and what has this got to do with finance, right? So interestingly, the financial world is full of missing data. In general, actually, no real world data is ever complete, but especially in finance, that is even more so. So let's look at some of the data that we have in the finance world, right? One of the most important things that we take in when you go and create your bank account, every customer has to fill in a KYC form, right? Know your customer and so on. 2 to 3 page form where you provide your name, your addresses, your income, location, and so on and so forth, any existing mortgages, and so on and so forth, right? Now, it is called as know your customer, but do you really think we know the customer just based on 30 data points filled in a 3 pager? Not really, right? I mean, these are only few details about a person that we get to know. We cannot really say that we know our customer really well just with those KYC type of information. So a significant amount of information about a customer, in almost like 90% of the information, is missing. Second thing, let's look at transactions, right? So let's say that I go to a specific retailer or a merchant or an e-commerce store and I purchase some goods at that merchant. So the merchant has a very good view about what this retailer has purchased, what this customer has purchased at my shop. But they are missing a significant amount of data which will be able to tell them what does this customer purchase from their competitors, or what does this customer purchase later or before coming to me, and so on. So they are only looking at things that they are privy to, right? Similarly, if you look at a bank is able to see the transactions that are made by this customer at that bank, or at using a card that this bank provides, and so on. But this customer may be making other cash transactions which the bank does not get to know. This customer may be making transactions at other banks. This customer may be making transactions using cards that are issued by some other banks as well. So again, coming to the same point of missing data, this every bank is able to see only a subset of that amount of transactions that all of us in some sense do, right? So again, banks have a missing data problem. They do not know what all transactions their customers are doing in their entire universe in some sense, right? The third missing data point comes from past experiences. As an example, just as I said that customers have how the customers have behaved in the past, you only have that history for the time that that customer has been with you. And usually that time is short-lived in specific industries. So it says that generally there is a saying that restaurants people get bored of in a couple of years or so. Everyday type of grocery type of stuff, maybe you can linger on for longer, and so on and so forth. So every industry has only a partial view about the customer. Organizations or entities that are providing insurances for senior citizens and so on are very different from the ones that are providing insurance or loans for people wanting to do education, future education, and so on, right? So someone in his 20s does not usually take an education loan from the same company from which they would eventually take, let's say, a car loan or even, let's say, an insurance and so on. So all the past experience of a particular customer at different points in time, each entity has a partial view of things, again leading to the missing data problem. And finally, and in some sense it is not finally because there are many such places where you can see data is missing, but the one I wanted to touch upon is the external information. And this is related to the environment that we all work in, which means how is the global financial scenario looking like, which specific jobs, which specific competitors are stable and safe, what is the trend for going forward for particular jobs, and so on and so forth. So all of that information lies in kind of bits and pieces. It's not so easy to just consolidate everything and generate a genesis of all the external information which will affect our business in some sense, right? So these are specific examples which say that data nowhere how you look, whether it's in KYC, in transactions, past experience, or even the external information, it is missing, right? So we've seen what is missing in finance. We've seen how our brain can still make sense of that missing data. So now let's try and club these two things together and see what can AI do in the financial world if it is trying to replicate the brain that we were talking about, right? So machine learning and AI technology is actually trying to figure out how the brain works and then tries to replicate in machines, and that's why it's called artificial intelligence. But if we use the same analogy, and the algorithms are now available in the AI domain to be able to handle those things to us. So if we are able to now solve the problem of missing data in, let's say, KYC that we talked about, what will that give us? So there is an AI algorithm, assume, which now exists. Given a KYC document of a user, can it actually do a larger job of understanding that user beyond those 3 pages that they've mentioned? If we could do that the way our brain did, then we could do a better job of customer profiling. And in some sense, we'll be able to go into significant level of detail that we could do, our brain could do, saying that this is a Dalmatian or this is my Dalmatian. Similarly, we could do at a very granular level about a customer, so that we can then actually personalize products for those customers, personalize our offerings for those. We can do a differential pricing for them. We can do delinquency detection for those, because we know these customers in and out in some sense using such tools, right? So our offerings in the financial domain can be very, very specific for such using such technology. Coming back to the second point about transactions, what if we could take that 10% data and then use AI to be able to understand the customer better from a transactions perspective? Then we can actually clearly figure out what are the customer requirements, what is the customer behavior, what are the fraud labels that should be set so that the transactions are fraudulent transactions are detected, and so on. Maybe we could do a better job of optimizing a portfolio management system for a customer, because then we will know their entire transaction history across all spaces, and therefore we can say that this customer is risk averse versus this customer has a lot of load, and so on, and therefore optimize their portfolio using the larger information, right? The third thing what we can do is we talked about not having the information about the past experiences of a customer. What if using AI we are able to create a complete life cycle of a customer, saying that when the customers were really young, this is how they used to transact and behave. Over a period of time, after they got education, this is the kind of education loan that they went through. After they got a job, then this is how they change their transactions. After their marriage, this is how they change their transactions, and so on. So if we have an entire customer life cycle, then taking the past to the current state, we'll be able to predict the future state, and therefore be able to provide more specific insights in the future about the customers, predicting those events. And finally, a very interesting domain in the financial world is security, right? We cannot actually compromise on security. And at the same time, we need to provide a very good user experience to our customers, which means all users, all of us as customers, want seamless payment mechanisms. But the more seamless you make it, the less secure it becomes. And that is why we have mechanisms through which we have to put in the 3DS, CVV type of stuff, and at times biometrics, and so on and so forth, right? What if we are able to understand the customers better and realize that for a customer A who is in a secure environment and a setting and who is digitally significantly literate, maybe we can use a seamless security measure as opposed to a customer B, or even the same customer A, in an unsecured setting or an environment should go through a significantly larger number of steps before a transaction is completed on their behalf, and so on. Now, if we are able to do that, then we can personalize the security experience, therefore improving the user experience and at the same time not compromising on security. So all of these things are possible if we apply AI using the theme of applying AI to help with missing data problems in the financial world. So these were the pointers on the uh, opportunities with respect to missing data. And I would now just give me a second. I would want to move to the next part for which I will share my screen again. There you go. Perfect. So here now what you are going to do, and you're going to help me in this, is the second brain game, the first one you played on the missing data part. Here I would want you to see this video and just think about what's happening here, and why are things happening. So let me just play this video in a loop here. So I'm just playing it a couple of times so that we get the hang of it. Just one more time. So if you see, this person goes into a door and then just disappears, never comes out. And that is what amazes these people who are watching him, that how come the person just disappeared? Interesting, right? So the reason I wanted to bring this up is that we humans have a specific way of understanding patterns. We have always seen that whenever someone enters a door, that person leaves the door as well. So that's the standard mechanism of us having observed the world in a particular manner. But now, in this case, since the person never comes out, all of us feel very strange about it. How does it relate to the financial world? In the financial world, we are good at identifying patterns, as we just saw in this particular video. Now, patterns lead us to generate rules. And those rules can tell us that, let's say, if those rules are defied, then there is something wrong. As an example, in this video, you said, I don't know what's happening, but there's something fishy here because the person never came out of that door, right? In the financial world, what happens is that there is a transaction of X dollars from country A to country B, which usually never happens, and therefore we, let's say, flag it as an anti-money laundering type of a transaction. Or you label a particular transaction as fraudulent based on those particular rules and so on. Now, what happens is that it's easy to build those rules, but fraudsters get to know about those rules and then they defy those rules and change their mechanisms to do fraud in a completely different manner. Now, that's where AI comes into place, that if using AI, we are able to see that the way our brain was able to see in this particular case, that I don't know what is happening, but it is not a general thing for someone to get in the door and never come out. The way it translates in the AI domain is that AI can then be used to detect such strange patterns. Normal transactions keep happening. As soon as something strange happens, I identify that strangeness, and which is in the AI world called as anomaly. So there are a large number of anomaly detection algorithms, which all they do is they're just looking at stuff. They can't figure out what's happening, but they'll say that there's something strange happening. Those strange things can be trained by AI algorithms to identify, and then once large number of such strange things happen, you can actually generate and code them into a new set of rules, and therefore you can increase your capability to detect fraud and detect money laundering type of activities using AI algorithms. So again, replicating how the brain detects anomalies in the financial domain using AI, and that helps identify such anomalies in the machine learning domain. And finally, I would want us to look at this one more video. This is a game being learned by AI, and I'm sure you would have all played this Atari game. But I wanted us to just see how and where AI is going, because I would want to leave you with the thought that the possibilities that I talked to you about are very, very vast. are definitely there, but there are significantly large possibilities that AI can solve in the financial world. And to go back to where I started, I would want you to actually identify those possibilities in your domain. But I want to present to you finally where is AI leading. And this is a video of a algorithm learning how to play the Atari game. And all of you would have played this game that the ball bounces from the roof above and then it comes down, and you have to bring the bat so that it kind of is able to handle the ball rather than the ball falling in, and so on, right? So the algorithm does not know anything about all of this. It fails miserably, as you see initially. All it is trying to do is to optimize the score that you see at the top, which is currently 0, 0, 1, 0, and so on. So it after like some minutes of training, it will come up, and then slowly it will. This is what, yeah, 120 minutes of training. It just picked the game nicely, and now you see that the bat is moving automatically using the AI algorithm. But this is not so fancy. I mean, people are able to do self-driving cars, so an algorithm should be able to move the bat here so that the ball keeps bouncing, right? But some of the experts, I hope some of you are in the audience, if you know how to play this game better, you know that there is a specific strategy that can be followed. And which is what is interesting, that after just 240 minutes of training, the algorithm figure out what's the most optimal way. And now you look at the top left side. The algorithm is not only bouncing the ball of this bat, but it's trying to make a hole on the left side. And once the hole is made on the left side, the ball goes up and it keeps bouncing. So what I wanted to mention was that this is where AI is going, that it is able to not only solve a problem that here is the ball, so let me bring the bat here, but it's able to think in the long term what is important and useful, and therefore figure out a strategy how to get there. Now, how does it translate in the generic domains of AI and finance? It is like saying that if you know that a short-term strategy in me investing in a particular stock is good, that's kind of one step of training. But now you're able to figure out that rather than doing this one hop thing, if I trade here and then do this and then do that and then do this and then do that, then eventually over a period of 3 years my portfolio will be stronger. Such kind of strategies can also be planned using AI. And this specific domain which you just saw an example of is called reinforcement learning, where AI is being used not only to make a decision, but also to figure out long-term strategies. And that's where, in some sense, it's going to be a game changer for most of us. So given where AI is going, I wanted us to just think about the possibilities that we now have in the financial domain. So just to summarize, I would want to reiterate that AI is trying to replicate the way our brain works. It is always good to see and learn how our brain works. If you have a problem in your business domain, just see how human beings are handling those problems and how their brain works in that domain. And then you can actually replicate and figure out what's the right AI algorithm for that particular solution. And it may do better than the human because it can work on significantly large amounts of data, and then it can process continuously rather than humans have limited processing power and so on, right? So it's always good to understand the brain, figure out how it maps in the AI domain, and then try and work on that solution. What we had looked at are specific instances where AI can be helpful. We looked at customer profiling because you can understand more missing data. We looked at portfolio management, again, because you have algorithms that can work with missing data, which exists in any kind of transactions domain within the portfolio management system. We also talked about how security and user experience can be improved if we have enough understanding of how users work on what devices and so on and so forth. Then we talked about the customer lifecycle creation, not just this duration of the customer, if I have a full duration of the customer. So these were the pointers that we talked about from a missing data perspective. And then from the point of view of identifying patterns and identifying anomalies as soon as the patterns change is significantly important for domains such as anti-money laundering and fraud, because that's where there is always it's like a war between the good guys and the bad guys. As soon as the good guys make an algorithm or rules, the bad guys figure out how to break them. So it has to be a constant battle, and therefore things or solutions or algorithms that can continuously learn and evolve are the ones that can manage that kind of a space in a much more efficient manner. So all the stuff related to anomaly detection type of techniques within AI are significantly useful there. And finally, when we looked at how you can think about using AI for long-term strategies using reinforcement learning kind of algorithms, hopefully that will open up a significantly large area for using AI for long-term solutions and for building strategies, building partnerships, uh, identifying acquisitions, and so on, which usually are long-term events rather than the standard short-term ones related to credit profiling or fraud and so on and so forth. So that is all I wanted to cover, and it is. I hope this is of use to all of you, and hopefully this would have kind of ignited some thoughts in your own minds on how you can apply AI to your own problem domain. Thank you so much for spending the time with us here today, and I look forward to the discussions and collaborations leading forward based on this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Nitendra, for this insightful talk.
Now, once we have our AI and ML models ready to conquer the world, but maintaining and managing the pipeline of ML models is also a challenging task. Our next speaker for the evening, Juan Murphy, who will take us to the exciting journey of 5 Ws of ML Ops. Juan is a technical director and data science practice lead at Globant. He is working on the intersection of innovation, strategy, technology, and data. He is passionate about data, whether it is data science, data engineering, BI, or data visualization. As a leader, he believes in creating a strong connection with the team and empowering them to become a better version of themselves. Juan is based out of London, UK. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Juan.
Okay, so welcome everybody to this talk about the 5 Ws of MLOps, or 5 Ws about MLOps, where the idea is to approach the idea of MLOps and what it means and what we can do with that, why we need it, and things like that. Not from an overly technical point of view, but thinking about the value and thinking about the components, thinking about how to think about MLOps to ease our way into that, to evaluate platforms, or to think about our own kind of development roadmap that we need to do about that. We'll be talking about what is a way to understand the evolution of data ecosystems, how to approach this idea of MLOps. We'll touch on these 5 Ws, and then we'll discuss a couple of important features that we need to look in this kind of platforms or this kind of practice. And thinking ahead on what's next. So, okay, now we have this information, what do we do? So to begin with, talking about the evolution of data ecosystems, the point about when we talk about MLOps or ML or AI or data in general, the point is it's always about data. And the point is it's all about data and ways to extract value. And that might mean that we're talking about retrieval, we're talking about modeling the data, we're talking about access. It could be any form of function about that. But the point is that when we're talking about ML in itself, like MLOps, ML as a separate thing, it loses power and impact outside the larger data perspective. It's a way to extract value from data, but within that whole context. And this brings into account something that, yeah, sometimes we hear a lot of terms that are somewhat related, somewhat more fashionable or less, somewhat in the hype kind of wave at some point. And the thing is, we could try to define boundaries between them. That is not really correct. The truth is that whenever we're talking about any of these topics, we're usually talking about one part of the stage in the life cycle of data in general. It could be when we're talking about generation, capture, and storage, that we're talking about what used to be called big data or data platforms. Sometimes when we're talking about processing and consumption, we're talking about dashboards and BI and things like that. Sometimes we associate AI with a decision being made. But what happens when I'm using AI to extract data from a picture that goes into a data warehouse that then I look at a dashboard? Then it all gets really mixed up, and it stops being about, oh, is this technology or that technology, and it really puts into context this idea of the funnel value of data in general. And so thinking about this mindset about data in general, we want to understand how these different data platforms have been evolving over time. So let's say many years ago, most of the access to data was done through file system or SQL systems. Then we got into the batch and MapReduce kind of paradigm, where the whole idea of big data started taking shape. And now we could process vast differently amounts of data. And then the focus went on to, okay, let's go into more real time and streaming, things like that. And after that, we get into this fourth generation of data platforms that are AI specific or AI tuned platforms. Now, there's a catch here, because I'm showing you kind of a sequence of different technologies. And you might think, well, yeah, as they are evolving, they are going into the right. And I don't think that's the correct idea, because there are a lot of ideas or a lot of technologies that were maybe implemented in processing or in batch processing in AI platforms that got fed back into the loop and improved previous systems. Like, I don't know, NewSQL that took idea from NoSQL databases, or columnar storage, or micro-batching, or things like that, that made the point that this is not kind of evolutions. We should be talking about speciations, which means that for different contexts, these are more specialized technologies that do not undermine the value of the other technologies for other contexts, but we need to think about whether they are most adapted and think about that and use that, because they will have that feedback loop always. And so when we're talking about MLOps, we need to think in the context of the specialized platform. It's not that every data platform will be an AI platform. It's not that all SQL is no longer valuable. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the way that in the context of AI-specific platforms is that it makes sense to actually talk about MLOps, but we're still talking about data platforms. And now, having this idea of saying, let's approach more specifically what it means to talk about MLOps in the context of a data platform and all that. And so the first problem we have is that if we try to find a somewhat formal definition, we will get an error. It's not something that is already done, already made, already defined. It's an evolving field. There are ideas evolving at a high speed. There's a high frequency of innovation. There are several platforms that are increasing their scope in what they used to do to cover more ground, and they start overlapping, and they wanted to get into the space. But at the same time, we're getting kind of more increased clarity on domains and expectations of the different moving parts of MLOps platforms. And so we're not trying to define it strictly here, even though some people might say, okay, this is the definition. I'm not arguing with that. I'm saying it's not in our best interest to go that route at the moment. But what we can do is to say, what are the key components or the key things we want to have into account when we're thinking or trying to understand MLOps? And there are three main concepts. One is the idea of the continuous process. We don't want to do machine learning as something that we trigger manually once in a while, that happens only for one model, but something that is continually happening. And it also means that it is repeatable, because if we're going to be doing things over and over again, we need it to be consistent in the kind of results we get, so that we can get an evolution, and it's not a random process, and it was not just a strike of luck, and it was not something like that. And finally, there's a key component of governance, which is I need to be in control of the data, of the models, of the deployments, of what is going on with this operation, with this machine learning models, with this data, and making sure that in terms of access, in terms of regulation, in terms of whatever, this is controlled. It's not getting out of control. But at the same time that we are focusing on these three main aspects, there are some open issues that we want to tackle and we want to solve. For instance, we need to think about versioning beyond code. What about kind of lineages of data? Is that relevant? Is that important? That there's an issue with the ever-expanding required knowledge. Like, it's not about knowing about machine learning or cloud or versioning or data, or there's always something else that should be added to that knowledge stack, and that doesn't stop. And then there's this new approach to AI models that is complementary. It's not a breakaway in the trend, but it's to say, what if we, instead of trying to build new algorithms, we try to use different data to improve the performance of the algorithms, which is called data-centered AI. And so we're trying to attack all of these through an MLOps platform. And the whole idea is that when we're talking about MLOps, we're thinking about moving requirements from people that, hey, I have this guy that does this, I have this other that knows about the clouds. And we're trying to move away from people doing things into platforms to achieve that. And so in a manner of speaking, hatchet meet the unicorn. We can be a little bit more, let's say, nice about that, and think that we're slicing this unicorn cake into pieces that we can actually digest, and we don't need the whole unicorn all the time. And so what are these 5 Ws, and how can they help us understand what we're trying to do with MLOps, and why are they important? You'll see that a lot of the times when people talk about MLOps, all the conversation starts from the machine learning lifecycle. This means some sort of diagram like this, when we're talking about, I have some data and I have a data pipeline that gets ingested, then I train a model, and then I have a repository, and then somehow that model gets deployed, and then I have a feedback. And that's correct, that's true. But the point is, when we're starting from that point, we're saying, this is what usually we have done, and I'm going to extend it a little bit. And we don't want to do that. We want to think about what are the expected features of MLOps that we want to get, and how do we make sense of all of them as one piece, as one platform. So we're going to be starting from the other end and coming back into eventually the machine learning lifecycle. And so, And so talking about the 5 Ws, which are them, and what are we going to talk in them about them? So it's about what is composed of MLOps, so the functionalities that we expect there. Where, which means the logical and physical support for how that is going to work. Who, in terms of teams, profiles, stakeholders that get impacted or impact or touch or use the MLOps platform. When, in terms of the maturity in the data landscape for a company, where to place an MLOps platform in the roadmap, and so on. And why, which is, what is the value we're actually trying to extract from this? Where are we getting from this? And so let's start with the what. So the first thing we want about the ML platforms is versioning. And versioning, we can do several types of versioning. So we can version code, artifacts, data. And when we're talking about versioning, particularly for artifacts and data, we're not talking about saying, I use this blob of, 20 gigabytes of data to use this model, and that's it. I want to understand, how was that formed? That blob of data of that model versus this other one that has been used. What's the difference between them? Because the fact that I can just access the same one, if I don't understand the difference, is not really helping a lot. And some of the main concerns of the main utilities we get from an MLOps platforms has to do with how we version artifacts and data. And if we're going to be storing these artifacts and data, we need to solve also for the storage part, which is the scalable with efficient retrieval, secure with simple access to that data. But also, there's also the compute, because we will be training models, we will be running data pipelines, we will be running deployment pipelines. So the capacity to manage those resources in platforms, to manage some scaling is important. And now, once we're going to be starting ingesting data, training models, deploying them, the approval process becomes key. And so what we expect from an MLOps platforms is that we will have a way to manage access to data models and environments, a way to vet or approve a trained model to say, yeah, I can guarantee that this has a given quality, and the company as a whole says it's okay to deploy it, and finally to deploy it without disrupting our current operations. And that implies that there will be a process flows. And what we expect from that platform is that it is decoupled and asynchronous. So we are not having to have people at the same time stopping whatever they're doing to make this happen and move forward. And so these are the elements that we expect from MLOps. This is the things or the features we would expect to be included somehow in MLOps. And when we're thinking about them, we'll see that there are two things. The first one is a data platform core, which is what we discussed initially. So the most fundamental component of MLOps will be a data platform, a way to manage that. But there's also a set of governance tools, or a way to manage the way we use that data platform. And this is kind of the feature view of what MLOps is. It's about versioning, it's about storage, compute, approvals, and process flows, all tuned to machine learning ideally, but extended to the whole data ecosystem as a data platform. Now, when we change the W and we think about where, and the physical and logical supports that we are thinking about, where does this live? Well, there will be a platform in itself, right? Like we're talking about the data platform as a core, because there has to be somewhere that I'm running these processes, that I'm connecting to, that I'm uploading the data, that is running the containers to deploy or serve the models and so on. And the thing is, it's typically going to be on a cloud of some sort. Now, we need to think a lot about whether it's going to be a single cloud versus a multi-cloud versus specific products. Like all the main cloud providers will have their MLOps tools, whether it's SageMaker on Amazon or GCP or Azure or whatever, or whether we're going for, hey, I'm running all in my custom containers, and all I need is some way to, in a way, orchestrate that. So where it lives, it depends a lot on our data strategy and the way we're going to move forward that. But we know it's going to be cloud some way or the other. It's increasingly unlikely that our whole MLOps stacks will be kind of on-premise servers, except when there are some serious privacy issues and access to data and things like that. And most of the models, most of the processes will be done in containers in one way or the other. So it's turtles all the way down. There's nothing else sustaining this. And we can see this, that even for example, if you look at SageMaker, when you're doing step functions, you're spinning up instances that are going to be doing some data process and loading data, doing a process, writing the data down. So it's all about managing those containers, and that's the key component in how we design and how we build these applications. And the other part that is not these execution engines that will happen on containers are the feature stores. Feature stores are the hallmark feature. When we talk about an MLOps platform, we're talking in one way or the other about feature stores. And this is an idea that will come back up again and again. It's a practice that has been evolving in the latter time, and it's been coming central to many platforms that actually enable both training and serving of the models. Now, when we're talking about who, so we're talking about the kind of stakeholders that we have. Well, in terms of teams, we know that we will have at least 3 teams that we need to take care of. One is the infrastructure part, how the instances are provisioned, what is the configuration, access management, security, and things like that. There will be a team that's dedicated to data flows, because most of the things that happen on ML platforms had to do with data moving from one side to the other and being transformed. And the modeling side that has to do with, hey, am I actually building an AI model that's going to be doing X, Y, and Z? Am I building a data model that's going to be representing some other stuff and things like that? And the kind of profiles that usually do this, well, this is a zoo because you have everything. And one of the main problems of MLOps as a discipline is that it's trying to do all of this at the same time with the same people. And so this is going to be bringing some noise down the line. But if it's done well, if it's managed correctly, you could have these specialized profiles all doing their things, all coordinating well. That is not trivial. That is not easy. That is what we are striving to do and trying to actually achieve. Now, we're talking about stakeholders. We need to take into account that there are three parts that are mostly impacted, even if they are not using the platform. That is a product stakeholder, security stakeholder, and strategy stakeholder. Product, well, because whatever we design, whatever we build and deploy in this platform will be a product that we want to use somehow, whether internally, whether monetizing externally, or whatever. There's also going to be a huge security concern in terms of data access, in terms of breaches, in terms of someone trying to siphon data out, in terms of trained models. There's a potential for a lot of private data to be used and exchanged and processed within the platform. So that security aspect is critical. And on the strategy side, it has to do a lot with what the business is doing in terms of their business, in terms of the technology roadmap, and in terms of how they want to grow forward. So these are the groups of people that need to be taken into account when choosing, designing, or using any kind of MLOps platform. Now, when we're talking about we're talking about, on one side, the level of maturity that a company has. And the thing is that an MLOps platform or MLOps practice is a milestone of maturity. It's not necessarily the place where you start, but rather somewhere that you arrive when you have this level of sophistication that you can actually build your data pipelines, you can actually build models, you can actually deploy models, and then you can think about, okay, I can do this automatically, I can do this continuously, I can do this in this iterative fashion. So I wouldn't say that a company that is just starting their data journey could be thinking about MLOps to start with. It's something that you consider with a level of maturity. And regarding the roadmap, where in that technology roadmap is that we can think about, hey, this is the place where MLOps should be intervening? Well, we need to think about whether it's going to be a production lab, or it's supporting current production systems, or something like that. It's not the starting point. If a company is building their technology stack, they're probably not starting from the MLOps platform. They're starting from the data products that they will eventually serve through this MLOps platform. But it's not the place to start. You will spend a lot of time building a lot of capabilities, and you will not see value until way down the line when you start actually developing products. So we need to think about that. And that brings us to the last point, which is the usage. It's not the same working in discovery mode and deploy mode. And while MLOps as an idea merges these two a little bit, it's one thing trying to understand the data we have and the capabilities we could have, and it's a very different one to be training and updating models and deploying them on the spot, on the go, all the time. You don't want to expose your users necessarily to a model that you're just exploring. But once you have defined that, hey, this is a model, this is an application that actually works, every time you have new data, or as I get new feeds, or it's updated, or whatever, you want to have the latest version working in production. But this opens up the question, okay, what about some sort of sandbox environment? What about the development as an idea, as searching for what is that exact product that I want to make? not all platforms consider these two modes of operation. Many cases, they are overly focused on deploy mode and thinking that you already found all the models that you have and they are just being pushed into an endpoint and you start being consumed and retrained on the spot and things like that. But there needs to be a way where we can play with the data to find what are the potential next opportunities to develop. So the whole idea of when should we think about MLOps, we need to take into account it's not the place to start, it's a place to go. So it's what we need to take into account in our roadmap, not the place to start. You will start. It will be more fruitful if we start with a product that is delivering value, and then we find a way to do this iteratively and scale and things like that. But the main question is always why, and why though? Really, why are we trying to do MLOps? And the thing we're trying to get actually from MLOps have to do with, for instance, the value of continuous integration and continuous delivery, which is being agile in a pragmatic way applied to machine learning, which is nothing trivial at all. So the idea of doing agility with AI or with machine learning is something that is heavily discussed. So there are believers in agility. Above all, there are people that say, yeah, this doesn't mix with data very well because they're different animals and you cannot think of the features and development the same way. But MLOps enables you to actually be pragmatic about, hey, I just have this model, I'll push it to production, I'll see the feedback from my users, and I'll incorporate that for the next version of the model. So you're actually decoupling a lot of those kind of interactions or stages in the agile cycle of machine learning to make them liable to be developed independently by different people. So you have these aspects that could be worked as feature-wise and not result-wise, which is what all the time happens with machine learning models. In terms of talent, well, we will discuss this. MLOps enables you to slice the unicorn. You don't need the same person to know how to instantiate all the credentials for all the team in whatever cloud environment you use, configure the repository templates for automated code build and commitment, managing Kubernetes infrastructure, but also training an ML model and making sure that it's not overfitting, but it's a good quality model, and then being able to actually monitor that in production and know about the performance issues. If you're trying to cover all of that, yeah, you're looking for a unicorn, and we have been doing that, unfortunately. So MLOps as practice enables you to slice at a unicorn and start working with specialized people that really know their craft well in what they do. But it's this idea of decoupling that's most attractive of MLOps, this idea that you don't need all the same people doing all the same thing, but knowing the whole chain, because you can start separating responsibilities, how you configure the resources, how you have this tooling set, this way to version code and things and models, these approval flows, the actual training of the models, building the data pipelines. Those things start to get separated, and you start to have these interfaces where these things connect. Who uses what, when, and so you can start requesting improvements or requesting changes as features, and that sets the whole kind of development pipeline. You don't get stuck trying to do everything end to end on one stream of work, but you rather can focus on making it better in whatever you're doing. In the particular case of machine learning, you could be working on using the data in different ways, or trying different architectures, or trying different models, training schemas, and things like that, and not maybe worrying about, hey, I'm not sure my Docker swarm is working well. That's really not conducive. And also, once you have decoupled this and you have these separate parts, you start having this added value of extensibility, which is you can start plugging in development, whether it's about new toolings, whether it's about new functionalities, whether it's about new monitorings, new data sources, streams, etc. You can build upon that platform and start adding new features. But you're also improving on discoverability, and particularly did we talk about feature stores? Feature stores are one of the main elements that we can say that once they are present, once they are there, a lot of people can actually feed from that to discover new ideas, new features, to discover new data points, to discover sources that they didn't know were there, but that are processed enough as to mean something. So it's not just browsing through, I don't know, 1,000 different S3 buckets with a lot of files that doesn't mean anything. It's actually exploring through some structure that makes sense. And that's a big, big difference. But wait, so when we started, we said MLOps is about moving these requirements from people into platforms to achieve them. Let's try to refine a little bit this idea to maybe not come to a definition, but yes, to come to an understanding on what are we talking about when we're talking about MLOps. So we can say that it's about enabling fast iterations on decoupled teams, enabling agility, focused on machine learning and data, and that's a good one. But we can go a step ahead and say MLOps is about a modern data platform suited for developing and serving evolving AI applications in a governable manner. And I think this kind of definition is actually very useful to understand the kind of environment we're working in, the kind of features we're expecting, the way we want to approach that. There are still a lot of things missing from this single line definition about how MLOps actually does that. But we discussed with the W's about the what's, the where, the when of MLOps, thinking it about as this data platform specialized in AI applications in a evolving, governable, and serving kind of suitable way. Now, before we finish with that, the thing is, there are some important features that we need to consider. Not all MLOps practices actually incorporate them, but they are going to be very important. So we need to be mindful on how we will cover this. One of those is the versioning graphs. And so the idea is that within MLOps platform, we will have ingestion code for new sources of data, the raw data, the code we use to process that raw data, the processed data itself, the code to build a model, the code to train the model, the code to deploy the model, and so much more. And the thing is, these are not separate entities. They should be related in one way or the other, and understanding not only the lineage, but also kind of the semantic relationship. And this will enable us to say things like, okay, let's say that I have data that became tainted, and because, I don't know, we found out that on the face data set used for facial recognition, there was a problem with bias, and we need to remove every reference to that, which has happened with ImageNet, has happened with NLP data sets and other things. Okay, so I need to be able to answer what models have I used this data on? Or let's say that I want to extend a model and I want to say, okay, how can I improve the generalization of this particular model that I have? Well, I need to know all the data sets that I did use in that model to know what am I missing? What else do I have to add there? And being able to do this data-centric AI. But also I want to be able to understand out the lineage. So let's say I have this new version of the model, and the previous model used to work better, but what changed in the code that I used to process the data? What did I do different? Because having the blob of, yeah, this is the gigabyte of data that you used before, it's not really helping me understand why. And so that lineage actually is what I need to understand what changed and what needs to change after that. But it also helps us understand the thing about data quality, that is, data is only as good as the quality of the models it enables, and not always more data is better. We could be tainting a data set. We could be adding some sort of poison data set. We could be including data that makes our model perform worse, even if the training objective performs better. So we want to solve that. And there's one concrete example about this problem with data that we can see. That is, there's this model that generates synthetic faces. So let's say that I have a face with low resolution, and I can use that model to increase the resolution. And so I could be upscaling images. Let's think about this, for instance, for security purposes, on a camera for identification, for access to a private place in the office. And this seems to work very well. Now, when this model was tested in the wild, we saw some things like, hey, if I use this on a photo of Obama, I'm kind of seeing a racial bias there. And so let's say that we deploy this model because it really seemed to work very well, and we come up with this feedback, like somebody saying, hey, I used my picture and this is what it came up. Okay, now I need to go back and say, what were the data sets that I used to actually train this generative model? Because I might need to actually populate it a lot more with a specific diversity of people, of conditions, of lighting, or whatever. So I need to be able to revise that model and know what happened before and after. But whenever we're talking about revising the models and revising the data, the idea or the one value that we need to achieve is that we want a unified data access to that. That means that there should be only one way to access the data, and it should be through the feature store. So any development that is done afterwards needs to start at the feature store. The feature store needs to be kind of the converging point of all the data sources that come in, and the place where all the data comes for any model that runs within the platform. So data exploration sandboxes, like going to the raw data and playing with that, is still valid. But modeling-wise, if it's not in the feature store, it's not data, it's just an anecdote. It's an exploration. It's not something that I can use on a model for production. And with data, we consider data to be ready only through the official channel. If it's on the feature store, then we can say, yeah, this data is available. And it's a good litmus test for that. And something that we need to take a lot of care is what are called model cards. This is the idea that you should have this definition upfront of what the intent of a model is, the kind of data it uses, the kind of training function, the architecture, anything that defines a model, so that it can be communicated and understood better. And while it is a good practice from a design point of view, before we're starting to build a model, it is going to be increasingly a requirement for ethical boards, for regulation, for control. So these kind of documents are sooner or later starting to be a requirement for anything that has an impact on the broader public. So we need a way to incorporate this in the data lineage, in the model lineage, in the storage or the metadata that is used within the platform. And when I'm talking about model, while MLOps uses ML, machine learning, as a kind of central point, I'm defining model in a quite liberal way. So it could apply to, or this idea of cards should apply to data sets, to models, to features. And when I'm talking a model, it could be about visualization dashboards. It could be about data models that are used to build an ontology. It could be about sources from where these data sets came from, and so on. And this metadata about the data sets, about the models, about the code, about the processes is critical for avoiding this kind of complexity explosion and undesired model proliferation. Like a lot of the times when you have a business intelligence tool and you let users do changes, you have like 10,000 versions of the same dashboard with very minute changes. And so nobody knows what somebody else is using, and nobody knows really the level of quality of that. Well, that cannot happen with how the data sets are used and how the models are built. We need to be able to find whatever models are associated with an objective that we have, that are in production, have been in production, have been trained, data sets associated, and so on. But I think one of the central kind of things that we need to look for is the feature store. But feature stores, and I mean more than just some sort of structured database. It could really be anything within the data lake context. But it's getting increasingly important to have this unique, validated process data repository, especially when we're starting to count assets on top of the model. So let's say I have a model, I have a data set, that's all fine. But many modern AI applications start from what are called foundation models, particularly models that come from the BERT family, Transformer family. So these huge pre-trained models might be the starting point, And I might be using a data set either to fine-tune that, to engineer prompts, or to use in a novel way. And that as an asset needs to be registered somehow also as a feature store. And so what's next? Let's say we have an idea, an approach, a way of understanding, apprehending what MLOps is, what we're looking for, what we're trying to do with it, and important features. What's next? What do I do now? Well, the problem with the space is that there's been kind of a Cambrian explosion. The technology space is crazy complex. The number of offerings, the number of companies and products and startups that are building their toolings, the platforms and their codes and everything, it's almost untrackable. I mean, it's very hard to know all the products that are trying to play in this space. Now, many of these products or technology will focus on something very specific. Many will focus on trying to be a glue technology. Many will focus on providing a specific toolset for a specific part of that pipeline. The reality is that at some point there will be some convergence or some canonical options down the line, but it's not something established yet. Yeah, there are some major players. There are some major cloud providers that have some pull into their tools, but by the way things are developing, we are not sure about how that space will look within a year. So what we need to take into account there is if we are building or deploying or associating with an MLOps platform, a partnership is fine. It's a perfect way to kickstart that, to start using that, leveraging that. But my advice would be discuss an exit strategy, because that company might get bought, the standards might change, your needs might change. So we're still at a very early stage about how MLOps as a field and platforms will work. Do have an exit strategy. Partnership is fine. Do have an exit strategy. All right, so thank you, everybody. And any question that you have will be available to answer shortly.
Thank you, Juan, for such a deep dive on MLOps.
Let's move towards the next talk of the evening, guided marketing using analytics and AI. It revolves around how to use analytics and AI to drive guided decision making for marketers.
Our next speaker is Marina Scubo, who is Head of Marketing, Data and Analytics at ServiceNow. She is a thought leader, strong project manager, and dedicated leader with 20 plus years of industry experience. She has strong knowledge of IT systems and data warehouse structures. She is also a Lean Six Sigma certified professional. Marina is based out of Illinois, USA. Please welcome Marina Scubo.
Hello, good morning and good evening. My name is Marina Scubo. I run the marketing analytics team at ServiceNow and excited to be presenting to you on the topic of guided marketing using analytics and AI. So before I get into the meat of the conversation, I want to tell you a little bit about my journey in analytics. I started my career over 25 years ago at a company called CDW. It's a IT solutions provider. And that's really where I spent a lot of time honing in on understanding the foundations of analytics. And then after 20 years at CDW, I joined an enterprise IT software company called BMC. And I was able to take a lot of the skills that I learned over the last 20 years at CDW and was able to really revamp and build an analytics team supporting marketing from the ground up. And then in the last year, I was fortunate to join a company called ServiceNow, a company focused on digital workflows for enterprise transformation. And similarly, what excited me about joining ServiceNow was the opportunity to take analytics to a new level. And what I'm going to talk to you about is a lot of the foundational skills that I've learned over the last 25 years, both from CDW and BMC, and how I'm taking a lot of those foundational analytics and AI disciplines and really creating a more guided experience to help marketers be a lot more productive and effective in how they go to market. But just to recap, when I think about and reflect upon my career and my experience, I feel like there's a framework and a formula that really defines what has helped me to build best-in-class analytics teams and develop high-quality products for the business stakeholders. What's really foundational is having a centralized analytics infrastructure that connects a lot of the data that you have from a first-party and a third-party perspective in one environment, and that environment is high performance, it's scalable, it's flexible. Then investing in the right BI decision support platform, because that really is how the business consumes this data, these KPIs, these insights. And then building out an inventory of predictive AI models that are being able to guide decisions and recommendations along the customer journey. And then finally, packaging all that based on relevant use cases to tell a story and to develop insights along the way. So I've been very fortunate to have a lot of these opportunities in my career and excited to share some of those learnings with you today. So, what is the problem, right? I call it the marketer's dilemma, right? I think many marketers are faced with this, whether you're in mature or fast growth companies. There's a lot of data out there, a lot of third-party data sources. And in many cases, it's scattered all over the company. And then, thirdly, we have BI tools, right? Many of us, right? I can't think of any organization that doesn't have BI tools, but many cases, the tools tell you what's working, what's not working. What they don't do is tell you what to do next, right? To be more prescriptive in that next action. And then when you're looking at the insights in these BI tools, if you find a nugget of information, you have to manually extract the data and push it from the BI tool or your data warehouse into your CRM, or push it into your marketing automation platform or your digital experience platform, right? So there's a lot of movement of data. And really the net of it is that it's hard to be timely in the insights and being timely on capturing those signals and acting on them, right? So that's the dilemma. So where do you start? And I'll talk a bit about what we've done at ServiceNow. So what I'm going to talk about is our journey to guided analytics, and very specifically, you'll tend to hear some of the same frameworks that I mentioned when I introduced my analytical journey, is having a robust analytical and data platform, a concept that our senior leadership team in analytics has coined the knowledge graph. I'll talk a bit more about that. Having the appropriate investment in AI, and really what ServiceNow does as a company is building out the workflows. So let's begin. So when I think about guided decision-making at ServiceNow, we use an analogy called a decision factory. So I'm going to get a bit more into that. What is a decision factory, right? At the core, you can see at the bottom of this chart, there's this enterprise data foundation, a centralized infrastructure that collects signals from different data sources that you may have internally, different data signals that we capture from a lot of the MarTech and kind of third-party providers in the marketplace, putting all that together. The next level is the decision unit. I like to think about the decision unit is what is the best way to address the business problem that we're trying to solve. And there's not necessarily, one solution for that. One of them may be, do we bring in new data? Do we build an AI model to build predictions? Do we do an analysis to uncover insights? So that decision unit is more about how are you addressing that business problem? Kind of moving up the factory is our decision interfaces. That is more about, okay, so now that you have collected this data, or you've built AI models with predictions, or you've built analysis and you've uncovered insights, how do you disseminate that? One of the ways to disseminate that is using BI tools. BI tools are not just about sharing KPIs and performance. It's a mechanism and can be used as an interface to be able to share some of those recommendations back with the business stakeholders, or pushing it into CRM, or pushing it into marketing automation, et cetera. And then the decision on what the right interfaces are depends a lot on the decision roles. Who are the people, who are the personas that are consuming this data, and picking the right set of interfaces that best fits their day-to-day actions. And finally, and very importantly, is created automated workflows that help them to look at an action in the interface that they're consuming it in, but pushing it to that next stage, right? So if you see something that I'll go through more examples of this, but if you see an insight that says you should be creating an email to this group of CXOs because they've previously engaged in this, and this is the next best action. How do we build a workflow, right, to address the dilemma of we collect all this data, now we have to manually push it to wherever we want to take action, to build these automated workflows to be able to push that insight to the next step in the chain. And that really is, in a nutshell, what the purpose of the Decision Factory is. So this is just more of a more detailed description around the decisions, right? So it's about having data, using that data and signals to build predictions, uncovering insights from those predictions, pushing them into an interface that an end user, whether it's a seller or a marketer, campaign planner, or even an end customer, how they're consuming this, so that they can look at that and make a decision. And based on what decision, it drives an outcome and an action, right? And this is important because that is the whole guided process. It's really about taking everything from data to analytics to using the platforms and decision platforms like BI tools or other applications and changing the way people consume this and how they make decisions. And so it's more guided, it's kind of navigation and building in workflows. And that's the exciting piece. What excited me about when I joined ServiceNow, how they're fundamentally taking analytics to the next level and connecting everything and making it easier for, in my use case, the team that I support is marketing, right? Helping them be much more effective in their job and understanding what that next best action is from all the analytics that we deliver. And then the final piece of the formula, what I talked about, kind of the 5 elements, it's having a single data platform, having a knowledge graph. A knowledge graph is really just connecting all the different elements that you capture as an organization, whether it's product data or competitive install data or what you know about the customer, their segmentation data, their opportunity data, their campaign interaction data, right? All of those examples, connecting them in a web of knowledge, right? Using that data to build AI and machine learning, and then applying research and analysis to understand what to do next and making those decision points and automating it through workflows. That's really the formula that we've been using. So I'm going to walk next through a little bit more of examples of how we put this into action. So this will be about how do we make sure that we have the right signals captured, that we also invest in the right AI models to make sure that we can build this guided decision workflow. So, at ServiceNow and analytics, our focus has been around guided everything. So what you can see on this slide is that we have a centralized analytics team, and the way we think about our products that we're putting in market is whether we're supporting marketing or sales or the customer success team or the product organization, that we are building guided actions to support the key decisions that each of those functional teams take. So I'm going to walk you through what we do for marketing analytics. And so these are just examples, just that are in the industry. When you think about when you're building an AI inventory and building out models to support moving customers through their journey with an organization, what models do you need to have that can move them through the pre-purchase stage to consideration, right? Some examples here is even just prioritizing the right set of customers. Do they have the right addressable market in the space that you're in? How do we narrow that target set? Once we have the target set based on TAM, addressable market, right? How do we identify customers that maybe have a propensity or a likelihood to buy the product that they don't have today? How do we identify the right people within the accounts to buy that product? how do we deliver the right content through the right channel at the right time, right? To get them all the way through awareness, discovery to consideration, all those pre-purchase stages. And then what are the types of models that we need to be able to move them through purchase? Because particularly in enterprise software, it's a relatively long purchase cycle. So how do we move them through when they're in early stage pipeline to getting them to have a conversation, build the business case, get the right decision makers in their organization to sign off, maybe try and demo the products to the point that they're making a large investment decision, right? And what are all the things that we can do? In the case of marketing, marketing plays a role in maybe identifying customer references so that prospective customers can talk to existing customers and understand their use cases. Or maybe there are certain deals that have a higher likelihood of closing. So having our sellers focus on those. And then it's not just about ending at the purchase stage, but how do we continue to close that loop and focus on the right AI engines that we need to deliver value, make sure that customers are using the products that they've purchased. And especially important now in the days of telemetry when we can really understand what products have customers activated, not that they've just bought them, but they've actually activated them, that they're using all the features. So we can even guide recommendations at our events. So if we are inviting customers and they have certain products, but they haven't activated on all of the features, or they haven't activated on all the components of their entitlement purchase, how do we recommend sessions or maybe reading content so that they learn more and get the full value of their solution? And ultimately that drives retention, renewals, and loyalty, right? So these are just examples of the full kind of purchase cycle. And so why did I talk about this? It's really important. It's not just about having all this data and all these signals, but creating these recommendations. And so it's important to invest in an AI engine, whether you're doing this internally or working with a third-party software or a third-party provider, is to build out this AI engine. That's really important in this guided everything approach. So I'm going to walk you through just an actual lifecycle example. And this is actually important. So you have the data, you connect all the signals in a robust data environment. You think about what are all the different solutions and recommendations you want to deliver along the buyer's journey. You build out those AI models, but it's also important to just write out what are all those different life cycles and those decision flows that I'm trying to support as an analytics leader in partnership with my marketing business leaders. And so this life cycle is just an illustration of when you're trying to identify the right targets, maybe looking at who's visiting your .com site, and maybe we need to nurture them, or who are the right target accounts, and do we have a recommendation of the next best product? And depending on what they do with a certain step, what the customers or prospects do at a certain point, it drives the next best action. Maybe identifying who's the right person or people within the organization to talk to. What's the right activity after they've given us some signal of initial engagement? What's the next action? What's that next campaign? Through which channel? What's the right piece of content to deliver them, right? And how do we push that data in our marketing automation systems so that we can deliver a better experience? And then how do we move them to the opportunity? We work with our inside sales and our qualification team to give them the right leads, right? How do we give them maybe recommendations on what to have a conversation with these prospective customers in? And then ultimately prioritizing some of these opportunities that are more likely to close so that the funnel in which our most expensive resources in the organization, our field sellers, are working on the right opportunities that have the highest likelihood of close and maybe have the highest expected value in terms of return. And so it's also important just to sit down and maybe write out what are those business journeys, what are those business stories that we want to automate as a part of that guided marketing, guided selling, guided account management, that guided everything process. So I'll walk you through just an actual example of something that we're doing within marketing right now, right? So my persona here is Brian. Brian is a global campaign planner. So when I put myself in the shoes of Brian, I'm thinking about what are all the different questions that he may be faced with as he's using our tools or as he's building out campaigns. So let's say, fictitious example, right? He's looking at one of our dashboards and notices that for his product line, he has a gap of 5 million for the quarter. So what does he do? So part of it is, how do I bring in maybe more leads ultimately to generate pipeline and ultimately, help me hit my pipeline gap? So what we can first do is recommend, well, who are some of the right accounts that are new logos, right? Accounts that don't have the particular product where he has a gap. So this is where we can invoke our AI engines around propensity to buy around new logos. But then that's just a list of accounts. So next is, okay, who are the right people within the accounts that he should be talking to? So we look at the personas that we have identified. Maybe in looking at our available personas for these high propensity accounts, we see that we have a data gap. That pushes a workflow to our marketing operations team to tell them to source new contacts in a particular geo because we don't have enough C-suite, let's say as an example. Once we have that all integrated, then we look at, okay, what's the right messaging? So how do we build maybe an integrated campaign around a particular BU? And we can use multi-touch attribution or media mix modeling to recommend maybe having them attend an upcoming strategic event or having a conversation on social media with them, or maybe sending them a nurture email to get them to learn about this product that they don't already have. And then also using content recommendation models to not only identify the right vehicle for conversation, but what's some of the right messaging and content that we should deliver. So then let's say the set of prospects that we've identified for this campaign, they respond. And so we have these potential leads that we can give to our inside sales and our qualification team. But there's a lot of them. And so how do we focus their time on the leads that are most likely to convert? That's why having a lead scoring algorithm is really important. So as we move through kind of this middle of the slide here, how do we identify the leads that are marketing qualified and ready to have a conversation with the seller, and sending those for the qualification team to get ready for sales? And then let's say opportunity gets created, but they're stagnant and they're staying early in pipeline. So what are some of the actions that we can take and recommendations to move them to more mature stages in pipeline? Like maybe having them attend our executive briefing center and having a conversations with some of our solution engineers. Or maybe they're in the middle stage of pipeline, but they're still not mature. So maybe activating and getting a reference to talk to them and get them to move through the process. And then let's say once we get the opportunity, we're monitoring their usage, and we find that some of these customers are not completely utilizing their products that they've paid for. So we identify a set of customers, and then if they're underutilizing their products, we invite them to some of our strategic events to have them attend some of the sessions, or maybe have one-on-one sessions with executives so they can learn more about the products. So this is just a very practical example, similar to the one I just went through, where it's really important. You have to really map out and diagram and blueprint, if you will, this process so that you can build all the pieces and then use workflow technology to really automate this process through. So the last thing that I'll cover with you is that decision interface. So we talked about in the kind of the decision factory, building out the centralized analytics infrastructure. I didn't spend a lot of time around that, but I think many of us have teams that can build out really strong enterprise data warehouse and get all the signals curated in one environment. I did talk about then building in the AI models and identifying what are the right AI models to move your prospective customers through their buyer's journey. Then it's about that decision interface. So in a very specific example for the team I support at ServiceNow, I wanted to build more of a segmentation tool to take all these different AI models and recommendations and surface them in the decision interface. And the decision interface that we're using is a BI platform, right? So right now, as I mentioned, the marketer's dilemma, they have to go to multiple dashboards as they're building their campaign to see who are the right accounts that I should be targeting. And oh, by the way, do I have the right number of personas based on who I want to go after? They have to go to 2 distinct dashboards right now. And then they can go to a campaign performance dashboard to see, well, here's the right campaign that have been working historically for this audience. So what we're trying to do is consolidate this all into one segmentation tool so that a marketer has a guided decision flow. And kind of right now, we're building out the different stories, but they can walk through all those different stories and have a more of a guided experience of answering all these questions. And then at the end of the day, behind this BI tool is a workflow engine that, depending on what endpoint they are in the BI tool, it pushes the data to that next action. So it may be pushing it to an application like our Marketo automation platform. It could be pushing it into Adobe Experience platforms. It could be pushing it into an ad tech hub. It could be pushing it back to CRM, right? And so those are the workflows that you need to blueprint out, and based on different decision points, enable that. So just for illustration purposes, this is a tool that we built in our BI platform, and you can see that this is taking BI to the next level. It's not just BI for performance reporting, but it's BI to identify insights, opportunity areas, and then how do you take those outcomes within the panes of the BI tool and move them into automated workflows, so that as a marketer, I'm being guided through each of the steps in this dashboard. But at the end of the day, some of the key questions I gave in Brian's scenario, Brian has a gap of $5 million in hitting pipeline. How can he use a tool like this to identify who's the right audience to go after right now, right? So he can stimulate demand and generate pipeline to fill that gap and take that next best action. So to recap, a lot of what I've learned over the course of my career, and more specifically, most recently at ServiceNow, it's about identifying the right first-party and third-party signals. So I think all of us have a wealth of data across our organization. And so it's having hypotheses around what are those features, what are those signals that are really going to make an impact in this guided recommendation engine that we're building, and centralizing them into a single data platform that's high performance and robust and scalable, that can be used to invest in AI solutions, right? It doesn't have to be internal. It could be a third-party platform. It could be a third-party provider. But having an inventory of models, predictive models, that can be used prescriptively to guide that next action. And it's important to have those models across an array of decisions that are happening across the buyer's journey. The fourth is developing that decision interface. And I'm very purposely calling it a decision interface. We've chosen to use, in many cases, a BI tool. You can use a BI tool. You can use maybe homegrown tools. You can use CRM. But where do you surface those insights and recommendations? And then finally, as the persona who this is designed for is using this interface and they see an action they want to take, how do you automate that workflow? It's really important to be able to connect insights to action, and to take a lot of the pain point of being timely and acting quickly on this signal. Building automation into that process is really important. And the last, which is to me just more of an analytical mindset and mantra, is, as you build out these blueprints, is testing, learning from the blueprints and the guided actions that you've built, measuring the performance, and continuing to iterate and optimize. So I'm really excited for this journey that we're taking. And I think there's a lot ahead of us in the future of AI and analytics, and helping our business stakeholders be that much more prescriptive in their decisions and guiding their actions. So I hope you enjoyed today's session, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina, for sharing such a tremendous talk on guided marketing. Please keep tweeting with the hashtag DNX2021. Most liked tweets and LinkedIn posts stand a chance to win exciting goodies.
Our virtual booths are now open, where we have showcased our state-of-the-art innovations in the data and AI space. In the virtual booth section, you will find 3 virtual booths parallelly going on. You can visit them to connect with the industry experts and check out our innovation showcase. Our first booth is showcasing Falcon, Big Data Development Lifecycle Automations. Then, in our next booth, we have domain specific language translations. And last but not the least, we have document summarization in our third booth. The link to the virtual booths are present in the video description. Please use the links to move to our virtual booths.
So let's head over towards our virtual booths.
Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of day one of DNXT. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you must have got a lot of insights from these talks and networking events.
We will see you tomorrow on day 2 of DNXT. Till then, please take care of yourselves and have a great time. Thank you.
Thank you.